These days, seasoned casks are very consistent. If you buy a whole pallet of casks, they're all going to basically be about the same level of quality, give the same flavour sort of character. And this is why you go to the old and rare bit and find some of the whiskies over there from sherry casks. Some of them are absolutely stunning. Some of them less so. Because again, a lot more variation. And it's one of these things that when people talk about real casks, it's the bit where I go, a little bit, is because these are the real casks, these seasoned casks. But before we move on to do some things, this first Oloroso that we have off the map,
Yeah.
please tell us about it.
So the first Oloroso is a younger Oloroso because when it comes to seasoning, you want younger stock. There is a discussion of, it's not proper Oloroso. It is Oloroso sherry certified wine. The point to consider is the specs might not be the standard for bottling. Some people use the same one to keep it simple. But if I'm going to go ahead, if you take both Olorosos, the second one that you have,
So theme circle number 1,
Yeah.
as well as the one that's off the map.
so those two, if you compare them, one Oloroso has a sweeter nose than the other. One Oloroso is thinner than the other. One Oloroso is a bit waterier than the other. This is the one off place, the seasoning one fits that description. And the other one, which is an 8 to 9 year old Oloroso, has a little bit more body, a little bit drier, a little bit sharper, nuttier to an extent, not too much, but it's getting there. The nutty components usually arrive with 12 to 15 years old. They start showing up when you get the VOS sherries, which are 20 years average. But the question is, do we want good sherry to drink? The answer is always yes. But when it comes to the cask, do we want the best sherry in the cask or the sherry that is going to do the best for the whiskey? And I'm a very pragmatic man, and when it comes to this discussion is you want the sherry that does the nicest things to the wood, and that combo is what's going to do the nicest things to the whiskey. If we have I'm pretty sure that nobody would say no to a 45-year-old Oloroso here, or a 50. Great. It's sharp, it's acidic, has acetone, has nuts, has roasted nuts and so on, but it's very sharp, very vertical, very aggressive. Do we want acetone notes like nail polish and varnish in our whiskey? Yes. But we would probably go, this is a funky one. And that is the discussion sometimes. The seasoning is a bespoke suit for the whiskey. If you season your cask, you're telling a cooperage, I want this cask type size. I want this oak. I want this toast level. I want this seasoning with this wine for this long. And then you're going to ship it to my distillery so I fit my whiskey. So it's a suit. It's a bespoke suit. Sherry butts can fit in there if they're seasoned. But when it comes to Solera buds, like production casks, it's a little bit more temperamental because they've stayed in one place or another of the bodega. The type of sherry has been there, may vary a little bit. So it's less bespoke. Both options are great. I love both options because it's the diversity that we love in whiskey or in wine or in flavors, right? In this case, the second Oloroso is more of a drinkable Oloroso, have some dried nuts, potentially some anchovies and so on. The first one is, interesting, not going to order a second glass, at least for my taste, in terms of finished, done, built wine. Now, we want to play around, learn, and mess about, 100%. And that's why we're bringing it here. After what I've said, I'm sure that nobody's going to say, anybody like the first one better than the second? Yeah, because of the sweetness.
Would that be 3 whiskey producers put their hands up there? Okay, There we go. So, it's one of the things about seasoning sherry that there's a myth about it. And this is my first time to try any specific seasoning sherry. I've been trying to get to give you some for ages, but finally, yeah. But it's often thought when you get past that whole thing of it is not regular drinking sherry, people immediately go, it's rubbish. It's not. This is a wine, as you say, created to make the cask good. And so what we do have now, though, is that we do have 3 sherries to compare against the whiskies. These are drinking sherries.
Yeah.
So, finding 3 different sort of seasoning sherries would just be maybe not the most fun tasting. As you see here, generally they're not so complex, they're not so big and rich and everything. So,
it's incredibly sweet. You have to throw your palate off the window. Another thing that can be done with seasoning sherry after it's been used is vermouth. Wood. So there's a couple of bodegas out there producing vermouth. It's pretty tasty because it's had this wood contact, lots of tannins, plus the botanicals. It's good stuff. It's good news. Worth trying.
So we've had a bit of a try the Oloroso. So we try that seasoning Oloroso. You'll see that sort of style, not quite as rich, not quite so complex maybe as the number one. If you want to grab number 4 on your map, the one above it, we did actually have some really nice maps designed by my colleague Steve, which had 7 little holes on it so you can see all the things. And Diego will be available after to sign mats if you require. I've got books to sign. Anyway, so number 4, this is an Oloroso whiskey sample. This is from our lovely friends at Tamdu. If you have a chance to pop down to the, what are they called? Ian McLeod? Sorry, it's Angus Dundee and Ian McLeod. I get confused between the two of them because they're just random people's names. So I get very confused. So this is Tamdu. It's a 2004 vintage, drawn after 21 years. So 21-year-old Tamdu from a American oak sherry bar. One of the things when we're talking about the different sherries we're going to have is we want to play around a little bit with wood. And this is from an American oak sherry bar. American oak and European oak are very different. More often when we talk about sherry, we talk about European oak in the whiskey world. In the sherry world, they don't.
Huh?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, this is 58.8%. Yeah. Yeah, so American oak is what they generally use to make butts in Spain. American oak is much easier to work with. If you've ever been to a bodega and you've seen them with these gnarly bits of tree and then these beautiful, strange American oak stones, you can see why. It's a much easier wood to work with, and so often we talk about American oak, we're thinking of bourbon casks. So in the whiskey world, we lean a lot more on Spanish oak, European oak, which has a much more heavy character. And when we talk about sherry casks, often it's not just the sherry which is giving some influence. It's that American oak or that European oak. This one is American oak, so we're focusing a bit more, I would say, on the actual sherry that was in the wood and the effect of that sherry on the wood. Yes, 21-year-old Tamdu. That's a pretty decent dram to start with, I would say. If you are anywhere near the Ian McLeod stand and see Gordon Dundas, give him a hug from us and say thank you. So he dug this out and got it drawn for us.
Also, any social media love you can give to the brands and bodegas and producers and so on.
Diego is Sherry Hound on the internet, and I am Meat Robot, but that's another story for another day. So when we're looking at this, is very much the standard when it comes to whiskey production and sherry cask. It's a pretty good whiskey, but Tamdu is a whiskey that works really well with that weightier style. So it's got a bit of weight to the whiskey, and then on top of that, we then have that rich dried fruit sort of character coming through. Although not over the top. And this is one of the things we've tried to do with these as well, is try and find whiskies where it hasn't gone too far. And we still have that distillate character and that balance. So what do people think of this one? Any thoughts, comments? Outstanding. Excellent. I'll give you your £5 later. Thank you.
So if you take the seasoning sherry, just for the fruit, and go back and forth, you will probably get some hints of those dry fruits, that sweetness of the sherry. If we link it, as Billy said, to American oak being toasted and seasoned, we will get the vanillas and so on from the wood extraction and blah, 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 boring bits. Yeah. That is the idea. Time and contact and interaction is always going to contribute to the liquid. And this is an old-ish sample, so there's plenty of interaction with the wood and plenty of interaction with the wine and plenty of interaction with the environment as well because of the oxidization from the breathing of the cask and what have you. Yes?
You say, obviously rightly, that a lot of sherry whiskey, it will just say sherry cask on the label.
Yeah.
How often is that actually going to be an American oak cask that's seasoned with sherry rather than European oak?
As often as the Solera, but unless the producer states otherwise, it is reasonable to expect American oak.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Generally, European oak is a lot more expensive. So if someone's going to use the pricey wood, they're going to tell you they've used the pricey wood.
Okay, so it's only, okay.
So American oak, real quick, as in ticking boxes. American oak, tight, consistent, homogeneous grain, low tannins, sweetness, vanilla, coconut, happy days, low cost, higher yield. So simple. European/Spanish, because in European we can get the one from the Pyrenees and then Hungarian. Let's go for red oak. More tannins, temperamental, because it's Spanish, we don't follow the rules and things like that. Less efficiency because of the knots. And when it comes to production, since the grain is a little bit more heterogeneous, it's going to be less consistent for production. Great for funky, crazy stuff. But if you want volume, it's a little bit... So the standard, again, for sherry production, we want American oak because it's simple, cleaner, because you can wash off the tannins quicker. And if it's stated otherwise, that means that it's Pyrenica or Mongolica or whatever.
So does that mean that the bodegas, Jose Miguel, are they buying in American oak and then coopering casks themselves, or are they getting American oak casks?
So Miguel Martin is a cooperage. So he will buy whatever required to produce the seasoned casks. Bodegas for production go for American oak. Yeah? If we want to produce sherry, it's easier to go for, again, sherry butts are some big-ass casks, right? We need big staves, longer staves. It's easier to produce and to obtain with American oak because it's just very like American highways. Very straight, very boring. You're driving for 300 miles and not a single turn. And with European/American Spanish oak, it's complicated to get stave this tall. Yeah. Tommy.
Also,
Yeah.
if you talk about European or American oak,
Yeah.
if you are going to season the cask up to 1 year,
Yeah.
The European oak is much more dense,
Yeah.
and you want more sherry influence. So usually, it's recommended to use the American oak.
Yeah. Because you have
Get much more flavors.
lower penetration. Yeah.
Again, do we know brands who work exclusively with this European oak sherry?
Most of them with European oak.
I know some do exclusively differs, right?
They very specifically, because they used to be part of Edgerton Group, the guys there, their wood policy, they are very strict about combining American oak and Spanish oak. They'll have the same whiskey maturing in different things, and they'll use them in different proportions in their battings and their blends.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other brands?
Macallan talks a lot about it. They own a forest in northern Spain, which is vastly populated by red oak. They've been very vocal for probably over a decade or 2 decades on the wood, the provenance of the wood, etc.
The thing to remember is one is not better than the other. They are both just different characters. This is the reason why I really like what Tamdhu are doing, is because they talk about it. They do American oak releases, they do European oak releases. European oak is a really terrible term, as you alluded to. I was having a chat with Miguel Martin about this, and he was saying a Spanish oak, it's really gnarly, lots of character, difficult. And he said, and you have a Ukrainian oak, it is concrete. So literally you can make casks out of this the incredible Ukrainian oak, but it gives almost no character because it's such dense wood and it's really difficult to get character from it. European oak is 20 different things, but when you took such sort of flexibility in it, and so we're seeing, again, across everything, not just sherry, we're seeing people being a lot more experimental.
And open when it comes to what is French oak. There's 3 sub-varieties, main sub-varieties of French oak. Which one is it? Do we want to get to the subspecies? It will take ages to understand because out of the 3, one is rule of thumb, one is equivalent of white oak, the other one equivalent of red oak, and the other one is a hybrid, which is similar to what happens with Quercus pyrenica, which is a Pyrenees oak. It's a hybrid. That's the thing. Ali Etron says in Limousin, those are the main 3 types, but they don't grow up with a label. And in a forest, it's not that we have the Limousin section to the right, and then further down the alley to the left, you have the Allier, you need to go through analysis and through lab results to identify one by one. And that's a pain in the neck, and not only time-wise, but it's cost. So sometimes there's parcels of French oak. Ciao. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. It is very complicated because at the end of the day, trees are living beings and they do whatever they want. If we have an alien, we'll go, okay, there's a bunch of human beings here. We're going to make, juice out of them. Are we all going to taste the same? No.
That's a good idea.
We're not the same. We are the similar species and so on, but our background, our diet, our exposure to the sun and things like that are going to be providing different nuances. So when it comes to working with wood, it's complicated and fun. Then there's something that also comes up in Jerez with sherry, which is the terroir of the bodega. You have the soil, but you also have the environment where the wine is going to live for most of its life. And that is going to affect how it evolves. And that's going to, which is exactly the same that happens with whiskey. But with sherry, it stays there for years and years because it's a static system. Yeah. So there's a bunch of variables, and that's why it's so interesting. But yeah, we should get drinking.
Yeah, but this is the thing about wood already, you can tell, is that if you're slightly obsessed with it, him especially, it's really, really able to dive into it. And if you ever get a chance and you're over somewhere, anywhere there's a cooperage, go to visit a cooperage. It's an incredible place to learn about this and dig in a little bit deeper. I was in France and went to a cooperage in Armagnac and came out with my mind blown. Should we move on to a second type of oxidative sherry? Our number 2 on the mat, if you want to have a grab at that. Yeah, sorry, it's quite a small sample. We ended up with not quite so big a bottle of this as we were hoping for. But this is a Palo Cortado.
This is a very mysterious sherry because I always introduce Palo Cortado as a mysterious sherry because of the documentary, The Mystery of Palo Cortado. And we didn't know where it came from and how it came to happen. This is what I call a hybrid with sherry because it has a component of biological and a component of oxidative.
Accident sherry?
That is the accident sherry, but accidentally there's a consistent amount of bottles produced every year by every bodega. Very mysterious. It's so mysterious that there's always the same amount of Palo Cortado produced. Now we know, we have technology and we have all those things and we understand. I had a conversation with Antonio Flores, who is the winemaker for González Valles, one of them. They're reviewing their archive and they're revisiting what happened and may have happened. It turns out that back in the day there were no hygrometers. And when you measure the alcohol content of a wine, when you fortify it, you make mistakes because you usually try it and you go, this is 15 or this is 13. And that is a phenol that has been deviated because of the ABV is a little bit higher, so the yeast grows and then it doesn't. So you get a hybrid. Is Amontillado the same? Yes, but it's not mysterious. Also, Palo Cortado is qualified as Palo Cortado by a tasting panel. So an Amontillado can become a Palo Cortado based on the flavor profile. Even an Oloroso can be qualified as a Palo Cortado. We thought we would bring it just to have something very tasty as well, because this one is very tasty. It comes from a bodega that I'm particularly fond of, which is Fernando de Castilla, owned by a Norwegian gentleman. It was very nice. And they do a wide array of sherries. The antique collection, which is the older side of the spectrum, is absolutely delicious from the Fino to the PX. And they also produce a very good brandy. So,
Is it right that there is no exact definition for Palo Cortado? Because I saw a lot of Palo Cortado and it's non-consistent at all.
And
Yeah.
winemaker is going to tell you a different story.
exactly. It's a little bit like the fairy dust in some distilleries and so on. The Consejo, the governing body for sherry, is going to define samples that are hoping to be qualified. So it has to have the nose of an Oloroso in the body of Fino, broadly speaking. So needs a little bit of, we know that there's a little bit of roasted almonds and roasted hazelnut, and there's that little sharpness of the biological aging that you can find if you still have some left over, even if it's an empty glass, in the Fino. So the white ones, Fino and Manzanilla, have something called acetaldehyde, which is crisp green apple acidity. And then when it oxidizes, we create something called glycerol, which is the nail polish, varnishy thickness, fake sweetness of the Oloroso. So this is a little bit of an in-between. Same thing with Amontillado. Yeah. So we get some thickness, we get some sharpness, and we get that balance. And the beauty is getting it right.
And how old is this?
This one is around 15 years average. In terms of aging, we have mentioned the Solero system. It's a fractional aging system, so we move and we take away. So it's always a touch of the original liquid. So an age statement is complicated, and a vintage is even more complicated, even though there's some vintage Olorosos and vintage sherries out there, particularly good casks that have not been included in the Solero system.
With this, we have a Glen Murray. This is a hand fill. This is from their distillery. We had another whiskey on the map,
Yep.
and it didn't come through. So we gave Ian at Glenmurray a shout. And he's like, "Did you know we've got just happen to have a Palo Cortado on our handful at the moment?" They are also available online for anybody who likes this. This is again 60.7%. I like to give you nice punchy whiskies. This is a 2017 vintage, bottled in 2025, so an 8-year-old Glenmurray Spirit. One of my favourite distilleries in Scotland, by a very long way. They don't get anywhere near the love they should do. I'm not saying that just because Ian's a mate, an occasional gig buddy. It's because their whiskies, you find them in supermarkets, and they are done for the supermarket market. So a little bit lower in strength, not so punchy, not so intense. When you start looking at the rest of their range beyond what you can find in a supermarket, when you get up to the 18, when you get to their cask strength whiskies, when you get to their whiskies, you find this whole extra realm of complexity. And their handfills are fantastic. If you ever visit, one, great soup and a sandwich, 2, boozy cocktails, boozy milkshakes even, and 3, they always have 2 or 3 interesting handfills on. So this one, as I say, this is bought especially by Ian for us and dragged down the other day. It is all about trying to show off a little bit of that Palo Cortado character. As we're saying, it's got a juiciness you don't necessarily find in the Oloroso on the palate. It has some of that fino zinginess, but you also do still have that developed nuttiness and starting to dry through. On the front of the Castilla, especially on the nose, that sort of like vanilla-y almondy note that you find in like older sherried whiskies, that almondy character, that nuttiness really comes through on that. And we're starting to get that. I say this is only an 8-year-old. Only an 8-year-old, and it's still already developing some of that character, start to pull in those nutty notes and really show off like a touch of acidity and zingy fruit rather than just that dried fruit. But really that vanilla-y nutty thing is big.
If you let it rest, and you can play around with it. If you shake the Palo Cortado, you'll get some notes, and you let it rest a little bit. You go to the top note, you get that biological note similar to the Fino. You get that oily, crisp element, and then immediately the roasted almonds from the oxidation.
Excellent. As I say, Palo Cortado is quite a rare one. It's something that people are using more often. I say Fino is quite rare because it's a very different style of sherry. Palo Cortado is a bridge between the biological and the oxidative aging, and it is something that still has some character that people are more familiar with in the whiskey world. Seeing more and more of it, but as you're saying, Palo Cortado is the rare whiskey. It's the
Mysterious.
accidental one. It's the one which you're not going to get quite so much of it knocking around for use as seasoning. And so, again, don't see it so often, but we are seeing more people using it, and with great effect to get that slightly different character.
Yeah, with Palo Cortado, when it comes to producing whiskey, it's complicated to find a whiskey that will keep that character, because it's very easy for the whiskey to overpower the wine, in terms of that profile, that balance of biological and oxidative notes that you get in the Palo Cortado and the Amontillado. It's easier to work with Oloroso because it's just one gear, boom, here we go. With Fino, it's the same thing. It's problematic. There's another region that produces Fino, and they produce it with a PX grape. It's a thick, has more muscle, so it's a little bit easier to work with it. So it all depends on what you want to do. The distillery, and it's like food pairing. You have the sherry and the wood, first combination, but then you have the sherry, wood, and the whiskey. And that is the ultimate food pairing that we're just looking to discuss in here. And that is a responsibility of the distillers to understand how that kind of triad of components are going to work out. And by wood, I'm overly simplifying size, not including size, oak type, toast levels. Am I making sense? You're very quiet. Yeah, okay.
Shall we move on to
Yeah, let's go for the last one.
Yeah. I would say probably before you dive into the final sherry, which you can tell.
Don't try it.
It's quite obvious.
Don't drink it.
Don't jump on it immediately. I would say first grab the whiskey, which is at number 6, and just stick your nose in it for a moment. Just have a smell of that and think about it in comparison to the previous 2. Everybody just does that for a moment. Just have a bit of a nose. That's a bit darker, isn't it? There's a richer, darker, sort of spicier note to it. The other 2, still quite fresh. And this one, for me, is it got a darker, sort of like richer, spicier note to it.
Warmer.
Yeah. It's not massively bigger than the other ones, but it just has a slightly darker sort of side to it. And then, if you want to pick up your sherry and give that a nose as well, you'll notice there is a small difference between this and both the Oloroso
Seriously,
and the Palo
don't
Cortado.
taste the sherry yet, because if you do, the whiskey's gone. This is We'll get there.
I'd say my dad's a wine guy, and he loves PX. He pours it over ice cream, and generally doesn't drink it on its own. He just uses it as a sauce, because you can see in the glass already how thick it is and how rich it is. I'm diabetic and generally avoid PX because it is definitely not good for me. I've got drugs, everybody, it's fine. I'll take them, it all will be well. But yeah, it's a very different style of wine. Diego, tell us about the ones of PX.
With PX, we're using a grape called Pedro Jimenez. It comes from a region called Montilla in Cordoba, different area altogether. They're the number one producer, and then Sherryland buys the PX grape, all the wine for this. Now, this is produced in a completely different way. You get the grapes, you put them in mats, so they dry out a little bit. When you press them, you're basically having raisin juice. We want to concentrate the sugars, not for fermentation, but for flavor, because we only do a partial fermentation with this. When you get to 2% ABV, give or take, you cut the fermentation and you add the wine alcohol up to 15, 16, 18. And then you put it in the Solera system to oxidize and concentrate. Yeah. This is the regulation for this type of wine. It's a little bit absurd in terms of the figures. The minimum, okay, let's play again. This is going to be fun. What do you think is the minimum amount of grams per liter that we need to have Pedro Jimenez accepted as PX sherry? Like natural sugar from the grapes. It's not that we're adding any sugar.
To give you an idea of range, to be called in mainland Europe, it's 100 grams per litre. So 100 grams per litre is sweet as in a minimum level for a liqueur.
And starting from 20 grams, rum was this name rum in its content, right?
Yeah, I think rum is now a maximum or something like that. Maybe not allowed.
Rum is a pirate drink. There are no rules for rum. Can you guess? Any brave people? No? 160, more than that. 250, more than that.
600.
No, that's a little bit too much. 600. No, you're going crazy now. It's
400.
low. It's 265, almost that. This is diabetes in a bottle.
I've donated myself.
This one in particular is around the 450, 480. Can't remember the figures. It starts with a 4, and it's on the high 400s. This is a very old.
It's worth.
Come again?
Is this why you've exported it to us?
No, sir. This is what we would keep. We would mix low quality of this with some Oloroso to have a cream, a medium cream, and then go. There you go. Enjoy. Bristol cream. This is about 450, 480 grams. Shred carefully. This is the very old edition of Jimenez Pinola, which is a very peculiar, and I'm not being ironical, this is a very peculiar wine producer. They're a wine producer that happens to be in Jerez. They work with barriques, which are 225 liters for the most part, and they do different types of things with PX grape exclusively. They play around with the levels of sugar, they play around with the production, they move around the leads like they were in France, and they do phenomenal stuff, but it's not your typical sherry. This is the closest, but it's on the older side of sherry. Age-wise, we're probably talking 25, 30 years average, easy. In terms of profile, you are getting the equivalent of a very old PX. It's thick, it's very dense, it's syrupy, and you get that fruity aroma. So if you feel brave enough, please go ahead. And also, cheers, by the way. Thank you very much.
Jimenez Pinola is an incredible company. If you get a chance to try any of their sherries, the last time we did this tasting, we decided to do a small explosion of people's brains. We gave everybody a white wine. And everybody said, oh, this is really quite nice. And we said, yes, that's a PX. Because if you just make wine out of the grapes without, you end up with a nice, quite fresh, dry white wine. These guys are doing amazing things. If you get a chance to try their stuff, please do. It's not particularly cheap, I will say.
No.
But there's a reason.
Not expensive either.
No.
I don't think they're...
How much?
That's about 100 quid a bottle, I think. So,
The
you know.
PX, this PX, yeah. But that's on the very old spectrum.
Yeah. The Pelican side is about 120 quid, I think. Yeah. You won't get it. But anyway, moving on. We're trying to use the Glencadam. So this is actually a bottling that I think you can't get anymore. So bottle 2021 was a 2005 vintage. So this is a 16-year-old. And so from a PX cask. PX is a type of cask that's often used, so these days, a little bit like a crutch for some distillers, because they can get so much out of it really quickly. But if you use them correctly, you can really add layers of depth and get real complexity. out of them. They work really well. Again, you have to choose the right spirit to work with. If you can stand up to that really darker, earthy sort of style, you're going to get in there, because the cask has got sugar in it as well. It's got this really thick and evil sort of syrupy sherry in there. You really need to be able to need a spirit that can stand up to it, which is not everything.
PX is a very complicated wine to work with wood, because that such a high amount of sugar is usually going to block the cask, and it will dry out and it will leak, and then people will panic because they're expensive casks, and then the whiskey is in there and it's leaking and it's horrible. But if you overcome all those things, you can get very interesting profiles. This one in particular is a sherry butt, so it's a little bit gentler when it comes to interaction. Smaller vessels are a little bit more aggressive with the interactions.
Where's the magic when we mature a whiskey in X sherry, but in order for the whiskey to get the sherry influence compared to just adding a little drops of sherry to whiskey? Wouldn't it be the same? Where's the magic?
To begin with, it's illegal.
Apart from in Canada, we don't talk about it. 9.09.
Up to 9%.
Yeah.
Up to 9%.
9.09, please.
But technically, yeah, the idea is to get a little sherry influence in the whiskey.
There's two aspects to it. One of them is just that when you add sherry to something, that's very different to sitting in a cask, pulling out sherry from the wood, which is sat in that wood, and is not the sherry you're going to get in a glass or anything like that. But the other thing is, sherry interacts with the wood and will extract flavour from that wood into the sherry, which you've then done. So the cask is like a mirror image of the sherry. So it's not only what is left in the wood that you're taking out, it's also the previous thing has taken stuff. It has taken things out. It has given like a negative impression of itself on that wood. If you just add a bit of sherry to some whiskey, you don't get any of that interaction. You don't get the special woody sherry sort of little bits coming out. But it's not loads of infill. It's not adding enough really to add a serious change in flavour. A lot of it's going to be the wood itself and what's left behind. As in, when I say what's left behind, not the sherry, but what the sherry hasn't taken away. Yeah, it's a fingerprint sort of footprint sort of thing, yeah. So it's a very different complicated interaction. You can, and if you, have anybody here ever tried about Alberta Distiller's Dark Horse? Fantastic whiskey. Cheapest chips in Canada. They just stopped making it annoyingly. What is that? That's Alberta rye with 9.09% Oloroso sherry added. And do you know what? Bloody excellent. And so you can do that. Oh, it's excellent for certain values of excellent. So, but no, so it's possible you can do that and get a certain character, but it's just not the same. This is the thing. There are more complex interactions.
Also, if it's a Solera bud, you usually get either residue from production. Usually they get them cleaned up, but you can also get some tartrate crystals. Will dissolve over time, blah, blah, blah. So there's a little bit of everything. It all depends on the treatment that you want for the casks, how they're going to ship, how old they are, what's been in there, the bodega standard procedure for cleansing the inside of the transportation sherry that you're going to get. There's a bunch of variables. For me, it's a little bit what Billy said, the devil's cut that you get with the sherry, plus the time. Sherry buds usually take longer to start doing their thing. Not necessarily because of the size, but because of the type of wood, because they're older. So that level of penetration you need to get is higher, therefore it takes more time, and then it will take you longer before you get what you need to get, probably up to the first 3 years. If you try it, let us know as well, because each cask is going to be different. Make sense?
So the big thing about when it comes to interaction of all of these different styles of sherry with wood, when you start using whiskey maturation, is it's complex. And that's one of the things we want to try and show with this today, is that it's not just as simple as PX tastes like this, Oloroso tastes like this, Palo Cortado tastes like this. The whiskey, you can see some of that aspect of the different wines and those different styles, but the wines themselves are all very different, and every single cask can be different. And you can't, again, if you're a whiskey maker, as I can see a number, it's every cask you're playing around with. When you get it in, you check it, you then try and work out what's going to do with it. Sherry casks, what is a sherry cask? There we go. As ever with these things, there's a simple answer, and there's also, it's a bit more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And every time you do that in the whiskey world, invariably, it's always a bit more complicated. One of the great things is that people play around with these. They've been experimenting. They've been working out ways of using them, where to put out different types of flavour, working out which spirits work best with different producers, even rather than in different styles. Yeah, folks like Diego are helping source interesting casks for people to try and give them the things which are going to give them the flavours they require. While sherry casks, even a couple of decades ago, were very much a, can I get some sherry casks, please? Yes. Can I have the regular sherry casks? Just put them in the back of the van, let's go. Now it's very much a, can I have casks which are from wood, which has been seasoned this long in the yard? Can I make sure the sherry is now in there for this amount of time? Can I make sure it's this style of sherry which has been aged for this long itself before it goes in there? Can I have them broken down and transported? Can I have them transported whole? All of a sudden, people are caring a lot more about the aspects of the wood to give more of that complexity. This would have been a really easy cask. Really easy cask. You say, what's a sherry bud? You go, here's some seasoning sherry. Or doors over there, off you go. Now it's very much more a case of people are playing, doing interesting things. And as the whiskey market continues to delve into these little realms.
So answering the question and being straight, a sherry cask can be two things. Legally speaking, according to the Consejo, so the governing body for sherry, it's either a butt or a cask that has been used for sherry production for a minimum of time, or new wood that has been seasoned with sherry certified liquid for a minimum of 12 months and supervised by the Consejo. So there's a QR code with the sherry cask code and the traceability. Legally speaking, that's a sherry cask. Or the other one.
Can we draw any parallels with sherry and Porto? People will always confuse these and see them as similar products, right?
That's a talk for another
winning
day.
45
That
minutes.
is literally next year's talk. So I wouldn't compare them to them. There are certain production differences which mean that when someone says to me, yeah, got a ruby port maturation cask here, been used for years, and you go, really? That's not even a thing. My favourite one also being, I've got here a Colliator cask. I go, really? Colliator cask? Yeah. So Colliator is single vintage port. Incredible. Apart from the fact they empty them all into a vat every year and then rinse out the cask, get rid of all the residue, make sure they're nice and shiny and clean, and then they fill them back up with sherry again. Yeah, Porto has got enough different production differences that I think it's generally not great to compare. They do a similar seasoning thing, but it's very different.
But liquid-wise, the production of port is a PX with different grape varieties. Broadly, very broadly speaking, you get high sugar content, partial fermentation, adding wine alcohol, off you go. Ruby, tawny, white, that's it.
Hear the screaming of the entire Portuguese nation.
Yeah, we're neighbours, so good. But broadly speaking, they don't dry the grapes.
Yeah.
They don't overripe them, so there's not that much sugar, but it's that partially fermented, sweet liquid that they want. And then barrel-aged, not barrel-aged, wine in the port deal.
For potentially more port next year, if I can find a tame port person. Semi-tame. But anyway, we should probably wrap up so we can get back out into the show.
Yeah.
I think. Before we do so, anybody got any questions? Any thoughts about the wonderful world of sherry? Anything's burning? If not, come see us afterwards. We're hanging around for a little bit afterwards.
Which sherry did you like the best? Sweet one. Surprise, surprise.
Is that the phrase? Sweet one with a very English accent there, yeah. Excellent.
Who liked the Oloroso section? Oloroso, Palo,
Arctado,
PX. Okay, and then the people who know.
Fino.
Yeah.
I
great.
I like Palicatado because it's slightly fancier than Oloroso, which makes me better. So, but anyway, no, thank you very much for coming, everybody, and saying we'll be hanging around for a little bit. If anybody wants to talk about sherry, say grab Diego. Where's my thing gone? Oh yeah, I wrote a book. Okay, it's my one bit of advertising. Annoyingly, I don't have any book signing time scheduled in, but I'm doing a talk downstairs 4:30 till 5. I'll probably be over on the exclusive stand or the Whisky Exchange down. They got loads of them in the shop, and they told me, please can you come and sign them or tell people so we can actually sell some. They even gave me one to show everybody. Thanks a lot for coming on, everybody. And yeah, we'll see you again next year.